To today's Model Teacher Evaluation System training. I am Sean Steele-Griffin here with Collaborative Communications, and we have been working with OSSE for over a year on helping to roll out the Model Teacher Evaluation system and continuing to enhance it as it comes along. So we're really glad you could join us today and that you're here for our kickoff training for 2016. So let's jump into it. So you should have a blue folder in it, are all of the materials for today. On the left-hand side is our agenda. You know, from years of doing professional development training, I know there are always going to be some people in the room who want to check off the agenda items as we get through them. So I wanted to offer that up to you first. We're going to follow what we've got up here on the screen. We'll give you a day at a glance. We'll unpack this Model Teacher Evaluation System. What are the benefits? What have we done so far with it? Spend some time understanding the framework and rubric for the system. Practice. Give some practice getting feedback using the system. This is going to be an active and engaging day. We'll take a lunch break, and then after lunch we'll talk a bit about implementation tips. Brocklin's actually done some implementation, so we'll turn to him and his expertise in the room. Talk a bit about student learning objectives and how they factor into MTES, and then have some time for wrapping up and final questions. So, with no further ado, let's go into our some introductions. Name, school, role at that school, and what teacher evaluation framework do you currently use? I was going to say I would model, but I kind of already did. We, of course, use the Model Teacher Evaluation System. But I'll start with Brocklin.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brocklin Pauls. I'm the leadership consultant for Bridges Public Charter School, acting in the role of an assistant principal and instructional coach for the early childhood team. Yesterday was my last day, so this is bittersweet. I'm just here representing our new assistant principal, Danette Dix, who will continue on to attend the meetings. We are currently rolling out the Model Teacher Framework for the Early Childhood Division at Bridges.
Great. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Ann Malone. I'm the chief of schools for Apple Tree, Early Learning Public Charter School. We serve about 1,200 kids, all 3 to 4-year-olds across the district. We've kind of flirted with different evaluation tools over the years, and used a combination of 360 feedback and job description ratings and student achievement, classroom quality. So we've kind of done a blend of it, and really interested to learn more about today.
Great.
Good morning, I'm Mary Kate Hughes. I am the Director of Adult Learning for DCFAP, and we currently use an internally created evaluation framework, some similar ingredients that we were talking about, and we're in the process of updating to align more to Common Core and just current priorities. So looking to learn some best practices.
Great, thanks so much.
I come over here so I can see everyone. Hello. I'm Annette Thacker-Bartlett. I work for OSSE. I'm with a Division of Elementary Secondary Specialized Education on the Teaching and Learning team. I don't know if do you know Dr. LaShondra Scroggins? Yes, so she was made to attend a conference today, so fun, and so I am here today on behalf of her. I'm her special assistant, so I'll be representing her here today, and also Orman Perez, if you know him, he was our former manager over this is his baby, but him and his team have been working so hard on it over the last few years. And he recently transitioned to the Department of Education. He's taken it to the national level. Back in June, I believe, is when he transitioned. And so we are currently interviewing to try to get a new Orman. But in the meantime, Dr. Scroggins is overseeing this work. And I am offering support and assistance as needed. So I'm also excited. I used to be a middle school math teacher for several years, and so I'm excited also to learn about this today, because I don't know very much about it either, and it's such a huge part of our team's work that I'm excited to learn more about it today. So if you have any feedback for OSSE, questions for OSSE, I can definitely take those back to Dr. Scroggins, my director, and anything like that. But we're very pleased with the work that our partners, Collaborative Communications, have done the last few years. So thank you so much for coming today. And we're excited that we're able to film it and have it as a resource for other school leaders that are interested in learning about this. So thank you for being our, I don't want to say guinea pigs, thank you for being our delegates today to learn about this. And we can, blur your face out of the video or whatever if you want. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Kavita Mutapalli, representing MN Associates. We partnered with the Collaborative and the OSSE group to externally evaluate the pilot process last year. So we produced a report, an executive summary, and we were honored to be invited by the Collaborative last week to do a webinar on the findings. So I think it's up.
Yes, it is.
As of yesterday night. So we will, I think you'll have access to the webinar and the presentation and in terms of what we found and some of the recommendations going forward. So thank you for having
Thanks for being here, Kavita. And then, so I used to be a middle school teacher as well. Something like 7th graders. There's nothing like a 12-year-old in the classroom. But I was in the classroom many, many moons ago. And one of the things that I find so exciting about the model teacher evaluation system is what a departure it is from the way we used to do evaluation for teachers. There might be that one where somebody will just show up one day and do a unscheduled evaluation and give you some feedback, but then you waited all year until that day that you scheduled with your school leader. You did your best to try to get your best kids in front of them. You worked really hard to create this incredible lesson, and it was so not authentic. Nothing about that process was authentic. It was just very, it was deliberate. It was, but it was deliberate in not a good way. And I think one of the things I really appreciate about what really the educators here in DC have been able to create, because it's not us, it's you guys that created this, is a system that is focused on continuous improvement, focused on providing real-time feedback, and focused on multiple opportunities to really create a community of learners. And that's great. So with that, let's jump in here. So there's a series of tools, and we're going to walk through those tools today, and you'll see them in your folders. And I just want to walk through what you have right now. There are a series of separate evaluation rubrics here for each of the key categories of learning. So learning environment, delivery of instruction, planning and preparation, professional foundations. It's there are 4 levels of ratings: highly effective down to ineffective, and a variety of, I'm flipping through all the wrong things, and some feedback and guidance for you on what each of those score points along the rubric mean, and how you would actually rate those when you were in the classroom. It also features both a scoring rubric and a action planning framework, which educators thought and really pushed on as a very important paired set of tools. It's one thing to do the evaluation, it's another thing to actually to have real conversations about feedback, to provide some coaching, to provide some targeted professional development that is co-created by the teacher and the leader who are doing the evaluation. So it really is an all-encompassing system. It's not one sheet of paper. And these goals were really all about supporting teacher growth. One of the key pieces for supporting teacher growth and for really implementing the system is creating a common language. Having the same baseline all across to know what each other, leader, teacher, other people in the building are talking about when you're trying to describe high quality instruction. And that's the same for in-school teacher evaluation. I also do a lot of work in out-of-school time on quality and professional development. Same thing for out-of-school time. Same thing for anything, really. You need to be able to speak the same language when you're moving into a continuous improvement process. And the other piece that's really a key goal for MTES is to have that frequent iterative teacher feedback. Let's keep talking about instruction. It's not one day or 2 days, it's multiple times over the course of the year. What we heard when we did the evaluation last year's pilot year, we were frequently in communication with the LEAs who piloted the program and also with the teachers in the buildings, and found that for teachers this is really they feel like it's a fair system, that they get really actionable feedback out of it, that the feedback is more targeted, it's more precise, it's not wishy-washy like, oh, they're good. They appreciate the action plans and the ability to really get specific about where they can improve. And administrators really appreciate the fact that this rubric is really a list of best practices, what you should be looking at. It's a really robust framework. It's looking at what's happening in the classroom, but it also looks at what happens before you even get into the classroom and how the teacher is planning for the lesson, as well as how the teacher interacts as part of a team and supports all of the goals of the school. Again, a real appreciation of the action planning tools. The other piece that's really important about the model teacher evaluation system is that it is it's meant to kind of layer on to things that you're already doing. So if you already do Danielson, if you have, as many LEAs here in DC have, if you have a special program at Appletree if, in addition to this evaluation system, you want to use the class tool or some other tool that is keyed towards early childhood environmental evaluation. It fits right in there. It doesn't have to, it can stand alone, the MTES, but it can also support other specialized tools that you're doing. It's really not meant to replace anything. It's additive. The other piece that's so great about this is it has been a really long-term and thoughtful process. As Annette mentioned, it was really the baby of Ormond Perez, who's gone on to work over on the other side of town at the U.S. Department of Education. But the history, which is told really nicely in a webinar that we posted on LearnDC this week, is Thurgood Marshall Academy kind of started creating this framework 3-4 years ago. And we're meeting with OSSE and finding a lot of success with this framework. Together decided that, well, let's see who else might be interested in joining this effort. So they spent a development year really going deep, looking at what had been developed, looking at the research, looking at different models, what was working, what wasn't working, iterating to get to something that was close to this, that was piloted last school year. And we started to create the pretty versions of all of the materials and had a bunch of LEAs come together and start using it, and created a community of practice to come together monthly to talk about what was working and what wasn't working. And especially in the early months, and this is reflected in the evaluation that we did, in the early months of the community of practice, we tinkered with the framework. We switched things around, we made changes, we took things that weren't quite working and adjusted them so that they would work better. And that brought us to what you see here today. So when we say that it is really by educators for educators, it is really by educators for educators. There is no doubt. So we'll go ahead and unpack a little bit and talk a bit about the framework. So as I alluded to earlier, certainly learning environment, delivery of instruction, those are two critical pieces to understanding how effective or ineffective a teacher is in the classroom over time. Also, however, planning and preparation is key. You cannot just, I'm sure there are still teachers out there that do it. Go to their file box and pull out day 98, like boom, here's our lesson for day 98. But when you dig into the score points in the domain items and planning and preparation, I think you'll see that it's not what this evaluation system is going for. And then the professional foundations, which are also so important to creating a true learning community. How much, to what extent are the teachers in the school, are the people that you're observing part of the broader learning community? How do they contribute to that? How do they become part of a team? But as we know, this framework is only part of the overall evaluation system. So just as we wanted to create something that was additive to what already existed, we also wanted to take not just what was happening when we went to observe in the classroom, but also taking into consideration student learning outcomes and the achievement or progress towards those at the end of the year, and student growth over a year. We did some rating of how all three of these pieces fit together into an overall rating, and have some suggested proportions and balance that the community of practice looked at last year. We can share that in some follow-up work. But really wanted to make sure that the evaluation rubric was working within a broader system. So, what happens when you go into the classroom? Well, you've got a, oops, that's the teacher action plan. That's the teacher action plan. So you've got and you've got multiple copies of these in your folder, and there it is, because we'll be using them in a little bit. You've got a classroom observation tool that and we'll talk in a bit about how some of the teachers in last year's pilot year use this, but really boils down for each of the categories into some specific domains that we want to look at when you're in the classroom. You'll notice that the learning environment and delivery of instruction domains are on the front page, and that the planning and preparation and professional foundations are on the back page. It's kind of purposeful, right? Because it's entirely possible that, and as I was looking at this for the first time, I thought, oh, if I were a leader in a school, I would probably start by looking at the planning and preparation on the back, asking if it was a scheduled observation, asking for the lesson plan, asking for some of the preparation materials, and make some initial notes about that planning and preparation. Then, when I got into the classroom, and actually Stephanie and I and other folks in the pilot group last year did several rounds of road testing these in actual classrooms, I would go in with this side facing and observe the learning environment and the delivery of instruction in real time. And the observation tool has the large domains that you're looking at while you're in the classroom. And again, this tool was one of the pieces that we iterated over the course of the year, and we're continuing to iterate and to look at as we go on. That the observation tool, you might notice, because you're probably looking through your folder going, oh my gosh, why are there so many of these? Well, that's because the observation tool and the teacher action plan look exactly alike. And that is purposeful. The change here is that we move to talking about next steps as opposed to talking about comments and evidence on this first page, on the first tool. So that is the whole sort of suite of initial tools. Again, it is the observation tool, the action plan, and then the evaluation rubric itself, which you actually have the full evaluation rubric. I wanted to give you some time to actually become familiar with these tools before we move on, because we are actually going to use them and practice with them today. So let's take the next 15 minutes to really let you kind of peruse these, mark them up. They're all materials are available on LearnVC. You can get them all, so you can absolutely write all over these and not feel like you're never going to have a clean copy to work from again. And spend a little bit of time just looking at them and becoming familiar, and then we can answer some questions and maybe get some of Brooklyn's insights. So I'm going to stop talking for a little bit and let you look.
DX or DX?
So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what you're seeing, answer some questions, get some feedback, and get ready to actually use this tool. So, questions, thoughts?
Can you talk about the frequency of like how frequent observations are done and then how frequently like the action planning?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually going to invite Kavita to come up and talk about that from the evaluation standpoint. So what we saw across the pilot year and how the different LEAs implemented that. And then actually, Brooklyn, you can speak to that as well. So Kavita?
And also, can you just add a little more as we're talking about
Yeah.
this? I'm also curious if most of it's done like on paper, handwritten, or if it's done electronically,
Yep.
and like how it's all
Great.
stored.
All good questions.
Excellent question, actually. So that's why I think the advantage of doing an evaluation of the evaluation process was critical for us to learn as to what exactly is going on in the school. Because you go in, as Sean just mentioned, that you go in with a paper, you go in with a plan, but then things change, things evolve. So our evaluation, just to kind of give you a background as to what exactly we did, was we obviously attended all the COPs, the committee of practice sessions that the collaborator was managing. And then we sat through the process to understand what exactly the teachers need, what are the leaders looking for in terms of feedback, and what does evaluation really need. And as John mentioned, that the tool itself went through several iterations before it kind of became final, because the feedback and the buy-in from the stakeholders is extremely critical. So once they had this kind of feedback, this kind of tool, some of them used them, some of them did not. Some of them said that we have our own internal tools, so what we're trying to do is pick a few elements from here and then modify them into our own system, because they didn't want to kind of rock the boat. It's like we already have something going on. Teachers are used to it, why change it now? So that was number one. The second one was, there's research which says that 5 is the magic number to do the right kind of feedback. Have 2 informals, 2 formals, and 1 just walk through. You can decide if you want to do it right in the fall. Definitely you want to do it in the fall, in the beginning of the school year. Do another mid-year in the fall, and then do informal walkthroughs to see what's going on. Have a checklist ready with you each time. Do a check. This works, this not, something of that sort. And then do formal observations. So the magic number seems to be 5.
Formal meaning that the teacher knows that.
The teacher knows that they are being observed. They are given feedback for all the 5 processes, the 5 observations, but it's like a known thing that can't be really formally observed. It could be in the form of a lesson plan. They are expected to come up with a lesson plan, and then the supervisor gives some real concrete feedback as to this is what works, this is what doesn't work, and can be modified, and so on and so forth. But what our evaluation really found was that there was a range of frequency of observations, from 1 to 7 or 8 in 1 year.
Would you say 5 is the magic number in terms of accuracy?
In terms of accuracy, in terms
terms
of
of-
getting used to, in terms of building a relationship, and in terms of getting like, okay, I think I get it now.
Okay.
Both
So
for the
not in
teachers
terms of
and for the
like
supervisor.
improving instructional
No,
practice,
yeah,
just
yeah.
in terms of
Yeah.
accuracy and
In
clarity.
terms of accuracy.
Okay.
And also, we suggested that to the supervisor, the director, the instructional person who does the observation, that don't go alone, go with somebody else so that there's an integrated reliability. But it's not always possible in a classroom scenario.
Yeah.
In a school scenario, people are busy. And if you don't equally train both the people, then it goes all over the place.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was a big piece of the the initial work with the community of practice was we did a day-long training a year ago, and one of the big pieces were school teams working together to kind of work on their integrator reliability. And you could actually take the next exercise that we're about to do and adapt it and use that as an integrator reliability conversation in your own school. As far as the paper or electronic piece, it was all over the map how people were using it. There are definitely people who are of the mind that you do the narrative evaluation, right? So they would come in with an iPad or a laptop, or the really old school ones hand wrote, and did the word for word almost transcription of what they were seeing, and then would go back and work that into this observation tool. Some people would use the tool and complete the tool as they were in the classroom. Yu Ying was in our pilot group, and Hilda Williams there loves Teach Boost and uses Teach Boost for kind of support in tracking and keeping hold of all of those. So there's a real variance in how people decided to use it. The other thing that folks did, because when you dig into this rubric, there's a lot of information there. And if you think about a school with a lot of teachers, that's just a lot of paper, if nothing else. So a lot of LEAs decided to, first quarter or first half of the year, we're really going to focus on learning environment, and because what our data from our observations said last year is that that's a weakness for us. Others, picked either all of delivery of instruction, or would 1 month kind of work on questioning techniques and really dive down there, depending on grade level strengths and weaknesses, overall school strengths and weaknesses. So people really took this tool and modified it. Kate, did you have a?
Yeah, I'm just trying to, I guess, understand the architecture, for lack of a better word. So,
yeah.
So there's the 4 domain, are they called domains?
Categories.
Categories, okay,
Yep.
so learning environment, etc. Then underneath each one there appear to be like 3 subcategories, like these things here at the top.
Yes, 2 or 3, right? Excellent, thank you.
And then each of those has between 1 and 4, like, I guess like the language thing. I just need some.
Yeah. No, I think that's helpful. So 4 categories: learning environment, delivery of instruction, planning and preparation, and the professional foundations. Then you've got domains within each. So if you're looking at learning environment, it's positive relationships and respect, procedures and routines, physical environment, and I feel like that, and then that's it for the domains within the learning environment category. And then you've got specific benchmarks, if you will, or specific items and areas that you're looking at within each.
Okay.
Brooklyn, so talk a little bit about how you all implemented at Bridges and kind of some of the ways that you use this tool.
Awesome. Right now, it was certainly an interesting time for us when this was introduced. I suggested that we roll it out, and so we had a meeting greet with all the teachers and actually let them, put their hands in it, in every single section, learning environment, delivery instruction, et cetera, so that they could sort of wrap their hands around it. And then we made a decision to use this as a self-assessment tool for the staff. And so the staff actually, rated them whether or not they were effective, how they affected mentally effective, ineffective, and not observed. And then we took the self-assessment tool and we went out and did several observations on the teachers and compared their self-assessment tool observation using this tool with our observation. And then we met them and said, how do we sort of meet in the middle? Where do you feel like your strengths are, your goals and growths and opportunities for improvement? Today, I met with Bridges a couple of weeks ago with the team, and we really talked about how this has to be the end goal, because it's very important for me and for Bridges to look at all the tools that we use for alignment. I'm a big alignment person, and I taught kindergarten, first and third grade, and it was just very important for me not to feel confused. And I said, I don't want our teachers just to feel overwhelmed, because oftentimes as leaders in the building, we hit them with a million different things and say, we want you all to do all of these things, and they just don't know how they all connect. And so we use a document to look at our first 6 weeks of school. From first 6 weeks of school, we roll that into the class. And from the class, we did an alignment between first 6 weeks of school, the class, and now the model teacher framework. So the third phase of it is that they will do a self-assessment, and this is how the year will end with this particular document at mid-year and at the end of the year. Just so the teachers don't feel overwhelmed, like how does this all sort of work together?
And what are you kind of seeing in their self-assessment tool?
Yeah, I think teachers are very honest about where they are.
Good.
But I think before you use this tool, you have to sort of let them put their hands in it first, so they can see what's coming down the pike, so that they can start at their own sort of road to self-improvement before you get this evaluation. And a lot of teachers are like, well, Rockland, I feel like I'm minimally effective here. And for us, we use this tool from last year and the feedback that we received to develop staff development for the rest of the year.
And there were a couple other places that did that too, right?
Another sidebar note is that in the, so when we did a post-survey for the teachers who evaluated using this tool, some of the comments were that, oh, it seemed very overwhelming to understand that many components, but then it got easier. I think that's a really good thing to learn, that okay, this seems like way too much. And in all honesty, we didn't have that many components, but the pilot group kept asking for more, because each time they would go to the tool, they would say, oh, but that's not there in the tool. That needs to be added. So as a result of so much of iterative process and feedback loop, I think the group came up with these many. So to you, for the first time, you might say, oh, this is a lot. How do I kind of checklist? Will I be looking at the checklist more, or am I supposed to be observing the classroom in action? So I think with use, it will be much more easier for you to understand, okay, this is really critical. So I think that was one of the most important feedback, and we see that it got easier with time.
So the checklist here, I'm trying to understand how those things relate to.
Yeah, and that's interesting. That is, so not only did we play around with sort of the big pieces of this as we worked on the tool, we also played around with what was here, right? Because with the boxes, it looks like it's a check mark, right? We also had sort of a line of the scores there as well for sort of circling the score. Some people, most people stuck to the 4, but some people would be like 3.5, 3.8, right? So where we landed were boxes that are not necessarily meant to be check marks, but meant to be a place for you to note those marks. Stephanie, can you pull up somebody's data collection tool? The Excel spreadsheet.
I think that's helpful in terms of what goes in there.
I get where you're going next though. Yep. So, so as you are kind of looking through the rubric, you've got the guide points that they don't match up exactly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is to give you additional guide points as both an observer and as an educator or teacher in the classroom to get you to the 5 that are here on the page. Positive relationships and respect. The rubric here is really giving you all of the pieces that can roll up into positive relationships and respect. The next, the procedures and routines, the physical environment, and different pieces were pulled out of each that rose to the top as the most critical, but wanted to have additional sort of items to look at and to think about that feed into this.
So are there specific like lines within like positive relationship and respect that map directly to one of these domains?
In some cases, it's a direct mapping line for line. In others, it's a couple of items together that connect to
And is that something that's scripted, or it's like up to the interpretation?
It's up to the interpretation of the, again, wanting to, walking the line with this tool between giving you something that's so scripted and so programmed to something that is, gives sort of on the rubric, if you think about it, gives the teacher and the observer the background to know what all goes into a particular area. And then these are, some of these are observable, most of these are observable directly, but these are when you're actually in the classroom and observing and looking at the things that are most easily observable. I mean, some of these items on the rubric speak to some of the relationship building that needs to happen, some of the behind the scenes that needs to happen. These here, fair to say, are you know, the obviously observable pieces.
So when an observation happens, is it recommended that you go in with just this, or that you go in with this and like mark as?
You need to go in with
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
this. And we've, you know, we had some versions of this that were actually much longer. One of the first versions we had was sort of it was that single
7 or 8
page.
pages.
Yeah,
Both
7,
sides.
yeah.
Um,
And, you know, it was the one that mapped very directly to here, and it was too overwhelming. There was just, you know, no way that you could kind of, you know, people were flipping back and forth. Just like, this is making me crazy. Together as a group over time, whittled it down to what you see here and whittled it down to a piece that, you know, was more accessible when you're in the classroom, when you're actually seeing teachers, when you're actually in front of them.
I'm trying to think about if you could just clarify not
Yeah.
observe, like to me,
Oh,
if I didn't see it, it's probably ineffective. I'm just curious.
well, if you're remember we're talking about doing short 10 to 15 minute, more walkthrough observations, as well as longer full lesson observations. And in some cases, depending on when you walk into the classroom, like you would probably more in the delivery of instruction category would you be likely to use that not observed, right? If you walked into the middle of a lesson, you might see some really great strategies and questioning techniques and examples in appropriate language, you might not be there long enough to see the reflection and closing. So the reflection and closing in that session may have not been observed. So, so that's that.
I think the most important thing is also contextualizing your own observations. If you're saying not observed, it doesn't reflect poorly on the teacher. It just didn't happen because of that situation. If there's a writing assignment going on, for instance, when we did assignment was at one of the schools, there was a writing assignment going on. Not much interaction, but actually the writing, when we started looking at the writing assignment, it was very critical thinking kind of a writing. So unless you actually get into the nuances, you won't know what exactly is going on.
Yeah.
So that's why it's not to be taken as a negative, but contextualizing everything.
But a really good question.
So let me kind of ask you in terms of your role, do you think yourself being able to use this, or where are you seeing yourself right now, given that the training has just started? What is going on in your mind?
I just started to look at like our current tool. And
Interesting.
the content of
Interesting.
this tool and looking, I think there are some pieces, particularly like we're trying to improve on like cultural competency and prioritizing that for teachers. It's like implicit in some of our indicators, but the language in here is very helpful.
Good.
So I just more started
Yeah.
comparing and looking for things that could strengthen.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
So I think, similar like thinking about what we already use, we already collect tremendous amount of data. We do class internally and externally. And we also use the quality indicators, which is another classroom quality tool. So I'm just trying to think about how we can map what we already use into some of this. And I guess my like lingering question too is, so is the vision of this, and forgive me for like trying to like piece this question together.
No.
So recommendation about 5 observations per year after the observation, but the results of the observation, whatever is reported here, and then I assume on the teacher action plan for the ratings, does that reflect only the quality of what was seen that day during the observation? Or, because there are some things in here, like I wrote down, like about physical environment, struggles to maintain it as such through the year, like some of the cultural competency stuff I think is important, but I can't remember exactly where it was. But it was like, well, you may not always be able to see that. So the question like, is this tied just to one observation, or as an evaluator, can I pull in other tools that I've seen?
Absolutely, any and all tools at your disposal. That's what we keep telling the teachers that, I think the classic example was Hilda's school. Chinese immersion, and then she has all these cultural things going on in addition to the instruction. She was like, I couldn't use this tool the second time. She was like, I have no idea. But then things kind of came together because she was pulling information from the Danielson's framework, from the other research that she had read, some videos she had seen. I'm like, oh, I get it now. So that's why the tool is important, because it's fluid, so that you can adapt your own contextual information, your knowledge into the classroom and to the teachers. And also we highly recommend, also from the survey findings, is that you have to work with your teachers because they are being observed, they are being evaluated. You have to work with them to see, hey, what works for you. For all good reasons, you might say, you'll never find this in my classroom because of X, Y, and Z, but don't kind of rate me down because of it, because it doesn't work in my classroom.
Or, if you are, for instance, perfect case, because Apple Tree is a pre-K school. So, the range of questioning techniques and strategies and how those are evidenced in your school and what that looks like is going to be very different from what it looks like in a 3rd grade classroom in Bridges and what it looks like for adult ed at DC Prep. So, remember also that this is a tool that's designed to be used in a high school classroom as well as a elementary school classroom. But I think to get to the nuance that I heard in your question, which was, you know, when I'm in the classroom with this tool, am I rating the moment I'm there? Am I, you know, is it what I observe now, or is it what I know, you know, and what I've seen over the course of the year? I think that's, you know, that's certainly a decision and a level setting that you make as a school administration and as a group. My perspective on that would be to record what you see that day in that lesson at that time. And by doing
4 or 5 times.
4 or 5 times over the course of the year, you get to see an ebb and a flow, and how that teacher, how that educator, how that group of students has you know, worked together over the course of the year. And you know, because of the tool and the accompanying action plan, it kind of gives you that evidence and that year-long narrative that when you're sitting down at the end of the year, or when you're sitting down to actually talk about a rating, you've got multiple sets of evidence to talk about. You know, maybe February was really hard for that particular teacher or that particular class because you had a lot of, I'm sorry, Stephanie, can you?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, sorry. Maybe it was just really hard in February for that particular classroom because you had a lot of snow days, you had a lot of days off, you know, there were things going on, and it was just super hard, right, for that class to gel. And it kind of gives you the opportunity to think about the context around that time and that observation. But did you find the Excel spreadsheet? Why don't you plug that in? Because this might answer some of your questions as well. So with the pilot group, we did some data collection. We actually collected their ratings over the course of a year, like how for each of their teachers or the teachers that they were using in their pilot group, how they actually, what those ratings were, so we could get a sense of how they changed over the year. There you
So
go.
this is an example of how Washington Union used this rubric to rate their teachers, and all of the different names have been removed, so this is anonymous, but you can just get a sense of kind of how they
There you go. Oh, because we've got the block there, yeah. So, so what we provided to the teachers who, the LEAs who participated was this Excel spreadsheet. And on the Excel spreadsheet, you can see that they put data in over the course of the year, teachers' names, the grade level, the subject, the lesson topic, co-teachers.
They set up a spreadsheet that had a space to mark each teacher some details about what the lesson was so that they could match the form that they had been using to the actual notes in the action plan and the different grades and subjects. And then based on which parts of rubric they're using at the time, they either put X's if that was not something they were observing, or they did numerical values for the different things that were being scored. And they set up this spreadsheet so that all the numbers were in one place, and then they could match it up to the actual notes from the action plan tool.
No, the X's just placeholders.
The X's, word numbers at one point, but I think something must have gotten messed up with the spreadsheet actually. This is a little bit of an old one.
So yeah, not to be like too data nerdy, but
Yeah.
okay.
So imagine I've filled this out with mid-4s and
Yeah.
mid-3s, etc.
Yep.
Is now like, is the actual evaluation like a number in learning environment?
Yeah, here we go, this one.
That
Excellent.
was just a messed up tool. So the way that they set it up is that they put in the numbers 1 through 4 for each of the subdomains, and then they captured an average summative score of each of the domains that they can use to kind of keep an eye on the progress over the year.
So it's an average of the 5, then you have like your score for learning environment. Instruction is an average of the 9.
Yep, and then they brought those 4 together to create their overall average, and that's how they decided to roll that in for UGIG. Now, you know, Brooklyn, you guys really are using it more for a self-reflection tool and less for a rating tool, so you took a different approach.
Self-reflecting, reflection and rating.
Oh, okay, so you did do rating too. And did you do a similar sort of approach with averaging scores within a category to get to an overall score?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
how
one
do they
thing
work
for
like-
each one of those categories.
Okay.
They
You're seeking to do is to
Uh-huh.
build in more of a growth mindset in the
Yep.
evaluation process.
Yep.
And not, so not just take a straight average, like to expect improvement, as opposed to saying like, you went like 2, 2, 3, 3, at the end of the year, you're at like a 2, because that's, you had more 2s than 3s.
Yeah.
It's like you grew, so now you are at a 3. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And actually, when you look at a couple of these, and I had the opportunity to look at how some schools took different approaches to doing this. The ones that did kind of track a score in the individual subdomains over the course of the year, you could actually see the up and down between like the 2 and 3 in maximizing instructional time and student growth as you went. So from a data nerd perspective, thank you, because I want to. From a data nerd perspective, it's teaching, and if you really want to capture and like dial down on specific behaviors that those teachers need to work on, you want to provide the information to them in a pretty granular way. So not to look at that pretty blunt score in learning environment, that 2.88 or whatever in learning environment, and you can, instead of doing 2, 2, 3, 3, set up an Excel spreadsheet to go to the tenths or the hundredths, right, to see how things shift and change over the year. But to go to the more granular level and see how within learning environment you're actually going up or down in the domains and the subdomains. Does that kind of track, Brooklyn, with what you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So in a way, it gives you and the teacher more data.
More data. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So are all of it, so is it recommended to like keep averages within each domain as opposed to doing like a summative average of all categories?
How did you do it? You did with an average within each domain, or you just put everything together and to come up with an end average?
Average in every area. Because what we really wanted to do was really zone down with, especially as we begin to onboard new teachers for next year. It's sort of like, here we are with our teachers from the 2015-2016 school year, and we seem to have issues around learning environment or delivery of instruction, etc. Now that we have our new staff for this year, how do we best take a look at these areas to ensure that our new teachers are able to wrap their heads around this issue so that we don't see that in 2017, 2018?
Yep.
And then build professional development throughout the year around that so that we can, as my friend said, have a growth model.
Yeah, yeah. So not just looking, so from the data nerd perspective and the data to inform decisions perspective, you're actually in multiple sets of data that can help you through the year. So you've got your individual teacher over time with multiple observations, and you can look at how things have come and gone. You can look at their sort of, roll-up average within category over the course of the year. And then you can pull it all together for a school, for a grade, for a team, and look broader at, okay, our new teachers, or look at a subset, right? A subset of new teachers versus a subset of experienced teachers, and really think about how can I look at it, and what did I do not so good with new teacher induction this year that I need to address next year, or what is it about our program that teachers aren't really getting that's really core to who we are as a school and what we do, which is pretty exciting. So I know Stephanie and everybody are taking good notes on this because, and I'll tease this up now, Brooklyn already knows this, we are looking to make this an online tool. And all of these data needs and the ways that you would want to cut the data and cut the information that you get from a whole set of teachers are all things we want to have in mind as we create the requirements for the tool. We haven't really had sort of these deep discussions about what sort of data reports and how we want that cut so far in the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I would
Just exciting.
love towards the end of this session to get your all's thoughts on what types of reports would be helpful for you and what things that you'd want to know, being able to look at the data set as we kind of pull together what this would look like on the front end and on the back end for different people that are using the system.
Yeah. So we've engaged with a couple of different audiences, and what in development speak is requirements gathering. So what kind of things do you need? Would you want an online tool to do, and what kind of securities would you need? What kind of protections would you need? We've done a lot about sort of the UX, so the user piece. We haven't talked as much about the reporting piece, so we've got time in the agenda to do that. Any other questions before we maybe give some of these a dry run? Like actually try the tool. This has been good. It's been a really good conversation. So thank you. So now what we're going to do is we're going to model an activity that we did a couple of times through the year last year. And that is we are actually going to practice. So I've got a couple of videos teed up for you. Each video is about 10-15 minutes long. They're actual teaching videos that we pulled off the internet. And what I would ask you to do is we'll actually do an observation. So pretend you are in this teacher's classroom. She's this first one is a middle school math teacher. So if you want to, and I forget her name on this first one, but she does tell it. So middle school math. It's a lesson on ratio and proportion. One of the things that we didn't have in the initial tools was sort of this demographic data up at the top. So go ahead and fill that out and do whatever you think will be comfortable for you as you watch this lesson. If you think it's actually, recording right on here, feel free to unstaple it and lay it out whatever way is going to make the most sense. If you're a narrative observer and you want to take narrative notes and then put them into the form after, and then we'll sort of we'll discuss what we saw, kind of how it was using the rating tool, and how that might roll into an action plan document. So,
Could we do a brief human needs break?
okay, here you go, guys.
And your homework for today. When you're done with that, grab a pen that's not black, and your answers from last night's homework are up here. You only did 1 through 15, so don't worry about those. Okay? All right, about 1 more minute to correct your homework from last night? All right, so you are correcting on your paper with pen if you got any one of these incorrect from last night. Okay, so number seven, you should have taken 500 miles divided by 6.7 hours. Who asked for number 7? Is that what you did then? Okay, so you needed help with the division part? Okay, so 500 divided by 6.7, okay? All right, we're gonna practice teach okay. I want you to tell your neighbor, ones are gonna tell twos, what is the first step you need to do before you can start doing this division problem? First step, you don't start until I say, ready? Teach. Okay. Switch. Switch. Class. Yes. 10-finger blue to Nick. Okay, Nick had some really cool hand movements. He was like, you have to take the decimal, you have to move it over here. And he got really into it, so nice job, Nick. Nick, can you tell me exactly what you were saying now?
I was saying you have to turn 6.7 to a whole number, so you would have to move the decimal before the 7 or after.
After, yeah?
You would put a decimal 0, 0, and then move it.
Move it over once here. Okay, awesome. Do we agree? Okay. So now you have 67 goes into 5,000. Okay. So can 67 go into 5? Heck no. Remember? Can 67 go into 50? Heck no. All right. Can 67 go into 500? Yes. But now we have to know how many times. Oh, I know, that's the hard part. Javier? 7? Let's try 7. 67 times 7. Let's see. 42, 43, 44, 45, 46. Is that what you got? Javier messed up and Fabian said it's cool. 10-finger woo to Fabian. Woo! All right, 469. So, subtract. I can't take from here, so I have to borrow 10 and borrow. And this guy becomes a 10, so I'm left with 1, 3, bring down the 0. Now I have to do, oops, I didn't put my 7 here, my bad. Oh darn. All right, 67 goes into 310. Okay. 5? Everett's saying 4. Ollie's saying 4? 4? All right, let's try 4. 67 times 4, 7 times 4 is 28. Carry the 2. 24, 25, 26. 268, yep. Subtract there. And I have to borrow, makes that a 10. Borrow again. 4. Uh-oh. What do I do now? Okay, 2s, I want you to tell 1s what I'm supposed to do. Ready? Teach. Okay. Switch. Switch. Class. Yes. 3 times 2.
3 times 2 is 6.
Jade, tell me what you were telling Gary.
A decimal after the last 0,
Here.
add a 0 after.
And put a 0 after it. What do we call that 0? That 0 has a special name. Placeholder. 10-finger woo to Jade. Woo! Okay, so I bring this guy down and I put my 0 here. Okay, now I have to do 67 into 420. All right, let's move on to note notebooks. Close up your spirals and get your notebooks out. All right, so today the lesson objective, which is also your learning target for today, find equivalent ratios and identify proportions. Okay, so I want 1s to tell 2s what your learning target is in a very secretive voice. Okay, ready? Teach.
Okay.
Class, class, class? Now I want twos to tell ones what the learning target is with very big hand motions and act like you're really excited about learning this. Ready? Teach.
Okay.
Class, class.
Yes, yes.
Give your neighbor a high five. Okay. Here we go. All right, equivalent ratios. Everyone say yes.
Yes.
You're so excited about equivalent ratios. Ratios that name the same comparison. Ratios that name the same comparison. Okay, Martin, you gotta get to our page, honey. Start filling it out. Perfect. So close it up. You got these two. Okay, and then we're going to talk about the word proportion. An equation stating that two ratios are equivalent. An equation, oops. Stating that two ratios are equivalent. All right. So as you're finishing that definition there, let's do mirror. Mirror words. Ratios. That name. The same. Comparison. Okay, I want ones to teach twos. The definition for equivalent ratios. Teach. Class.
Yes.
Mirror. Mirror words. Proportion. An equation stating that two ratios are equivalent. Twos are going to teach ones. The definition for proportion. Teach. Did you guys already teach, Everett and Hunter? Did you teach already? Okay. Class. Class.
Yes.
Okay. Give your neighbor a high five if they gave you a really good definition. All right. Why 3/5 and 6/10 are equivalent? Ready? Teach.
Okay.
Switch. Be careful. Be careful. Class.
Yes.
Class.
Yes.
Class. Okay. That was some good class yeses. I'll give you 1 point. Can't celebrate until I say go. Ready? Go.
Oh yeah.
Nice job. All right. So, can somebody tell me their amazing explanation that their partner told them about why those two fractions are equivalent. Lena, I want to hear.
Because, like, you're just pretty much multiplying onto it, and, like, when you take it away, it's pretty much just going to be the same thing.
Multiplying onto it. Oh, when you reduce back to, when you reduce again. Is that what you mean?
Like, when you times it by 2, and then, like, when you take it away, and when you take away that 2, then it just ends up back to 3.
Right, so I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lena, I think Lena's saying you can keep multiplying by any number you want, but then when you reduce 6/10 or reduce any other equivalent fraction, you're going to come back to 3/5 every time. Is that what you were saying? Okay. Great. 10-finger woo to Lena. So I want you to keep working on your own for a few more minutes. We've got about 6 minutes until the end of the period. Yeah. You can use two different numbers, but you have to use the same number on top and bottom on one fraction. Yeah? Yeah. So can you reduce 3/4 and 5/6? No, you can't. So instead of reducing, here, open your notebook. Instead of reducing, you're going to go up and multiply. So here, so you can't divide, so you're going to do this one instead. So you're going to multiply both the numerator and denominator by any number. So pick any number to multiply both of those ones. Okay? And what do you get? 9 over? Okay. Okay. And how can you get 12 when you put denominator for this one? Multiply, it equals, yeah. You can just write equals, because that is this here, let's see, this is a proportion. We have two that are equal. Good, 10 over 12, and 9 over 12 does not equal 10 over 12, so they're not proportional. All right, you're doing it right. And for number 7, you got not proportional. You did really great today. Give yourself a round of applause. Okay.
All right. Not watching that one yet. Okay, so I'll give you a minute or two to record, look at what you saw, come up with some scores, and we'll talk about what we saw, both from an observation point of view, and then also from kind of a scoring point of view as well, so you can get a sense of how you might use an exercise or a video like this to do some inter-rater reliability in here. Okay, so let's first talk about the evidence that we cited as you were watching this teacher in action, which I can't totally decide if this teach okay model is like the coolest thing, or if it would just quickly get annoying. So it's like, that was kind of great, but I don't know. So in the learning environment, what were some of the things that you recorded in learning environment?
It was certainly a responsive classroom. Very engaging. I think certainly there was a commitment to maximizing every opportunity in the learning environment. Call response activities were evident. She really wanted to know if her students had a mastery of skill by walking by everyone, doing some peer sharing to see if peer to peer, you could tell the peers that got it, and those who didn't. Yeah, it's a great video. I agree with that though.
Yeah. This California induction this website, a ton of videos. I actually was like, oh, this is like a treasure trove. So bookmark that one. It's worth looking at. Other things that you observed in the learning environment. Anne or Mary Kate?
One of the things I struggle with is, and I don't know if it was in like the holding students accountable for their behavior and learning.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the camera was on those two kids in the back and clearly were totally
Yep.
disengaged, and there
Yep.
was no
Totally.
there was
Yep.
no accountability for them.
Right.
Yeah.
But the overall student environment was,
Yep.
there was lots of student work displayed and.
Yeah. Overall good. We're disengaged. It's back. Anything to add, Mary Kate?
I think this strategies for maximizing instructional time, particularly during transitions, like a lot of her little column responses got through transitions really crisply and back to peer interactions.
Yeah, I really, knowing middle school learners as I do, I really liked her pacing. Like I could see, and that is totally one of those things that, in a middle school environment, that pacing was good, but if you had younger children, if you had high school kids, that pacing might not have been as appropriate. So what, so if you were gonna rate this teacher in learning environment, let's just do an overall rating. What would the overall rating in learning environment be, do you think? Rockland, what would you give her?
Probably a 3 for effective. I mean, she's highly effective, but I think there was some, you said with the students in the back, accountability. I would probably give her a 3.
Okay, Anne?
For the overall score?
For the overall score in learning environment, yeah.
Yeah, if I marked each box, like some 3s, some 4s. So, yeah.
Probably. Okay, great. Okay, 6, 3, 4.
I'm at a 3. I think, yeah, I'm at a 3.
So so this was really your first time using the tool. So how did that feel? Obviously probably rushed and difficult. But what were some things that worked for you and some things that maybe didn't work for you so much? And this tool when you were sitting down for an observation.
I'm a little stuck on the lack of alignment between these look fors and these more detailed levels.
Okay.
So I find them both interesting lenses, but I'm just having trouble connecting the two to decide
Yeah.
the number.
So you were really looking more at were you relying more on the rubric or more on the tool?
I think what was happening for me is I was going more with do I believe she maximized instructional time and student growth? Then I'd look at my evidence and just 4, 3, 2, 1 it. But then when I went to look at the rubric, I guess my question is, what could I tell her would bring it from a 3 to a 4?
Good point.
And just trying to figure out where that lives.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think I was on the same camp, and it would help me, and I think part of it is all of the observations that we do at Apple Tree currently are very mapped to this rating is based on these rubrics. So where I was having trouble, I was thinking about okay, maximizing the instructional time and student growth. I would love to know specific lines that map to that.
Got it. Okay.
If that's how it's intended to be, or if it's supposed to be more comprehensive, it's just an adjustment.
Yeah. Fine. Rockland, any? Yeah. No, I sort of took the approach where I was as in there watching the lesson, sort of recording evidence and, particular things. that I would then, I think, sit and apply as I rated and not try to rate while I was watching it. But let's actually go to the, and on the next one, what we'll do is we'll focus our feedback on the delivery of instruction when we talk about the feedback on the next one. But if you look at the teacher action plan, because you really heat us up into thinking that way and looking that way, and thank you, Mary Kate, because it's a segue I wanted to go to. You gave it right there to me. What might be some next steps, hearing that you as an observer would like to be able to rely on the rubric, right, for pulling those next steps, and I totally get that. For this teacher, what might be some next steps? What might be some things that you would have included in her action plan? I think one of the things that I might have included in her action plan was for me, there seemed to be, and part of this was probably the way they cut the video, so in real life this may not have been the case, there seemed to be a definite disconnect for me between that, know-it notebook, writing down the definition of a ratio and proportionality, which is like, that's a tough concept to get. And as I was sitting in there listening, like those words, those words mean nothing to me, and it was hard for me to get a sense of from the students if they were just repeating the words that were on the paper or if they were really kind of getting them, because it did seem like in the practice later that might have been the case, that people were struggling with the concept because of the questions that she had to answer. So I think one of my next steps or areas to work on for this teacher would be to look for some opportunities to dial in a little bit more deeply on the understanding of those terms or concepts. Look for some different approaches instead of the whole group to make sure that people had understanding. We also didn't see an exit ticket. Like I would have maybe recommended some exit ticket that got to that piece. I don't know. What about you guys for next steps or action for this teacher?
Specific learning environment?
Yeah, specific to learning environment. Let's stick with learning environment specifically.
So the one that you just said, you would communicate that to, you would connect that to like high expectations. Because I'm with you in terms,
Yeah.
like, I don't think she can get to a 4 anywhere if that's the level that she's teaching concepts at.
Yeah.
But I don't know that she can tweak the learning environment to fix that. Like
That good point. I think that's probably a delivery of instruction item.
Yeah. Okay.
So for our next step, based on learning environment, thinking about the kids who are disengaged in the back.
Yep.
Setting a next step around like how you're ensuring engagement. 90% of kids.
Yeah, and even going more deeply, thinking about you've got one person in that group that seemed like in that one pair that really wanted to be engaged with somebody, and how are you making sure that young lady is not always stuck with somebody who's not wanting to be engaged.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Any other next steps that kind of in learning environment that jump out at you for that teacher? Okay, fair enough. And actually, if you're a real geek and want to go really deep on this, there is an accompanying video of the post observation conference with the observer for this teacher. That I'll make sure we get the link to. I'll double check that at lunch when we break. So let's, on this next one, we've got another video. It couldn't be more different. It's a very different approach to teaching and learning on this one. I'm going to slide this guy over for a minute. Okay, so here we have Miss Rios and second grade math. Miss Rios has a different demeanor.
And basically, I wanted the students to understand why we use an estimate and the correlation between estimation and actual measurements.
Boys and girls, yesterday we talked about measurement. We talked about sometimes when we do measurement, we make estimates. We read a book yesterday where they measured some things in that book. Who can tell me what they used in that book to measure? Erica.
A foot.
And we learned that they used whose foot in that book? Isaiah.
The king's.
They used the king's foot. Because there was a king who liked his body so much to measure things, they came up with a stick, and because he was the king, they call this a what? Does anybody remember what they call it? They call it, Chanel, a ruler. That's right, because the king was the ruler, right? And that king liked measuring things with his body so much that when he wanted to measure the little parts on the ruler, he used another part of his body. He used this part of his thumb right here, from his knuckle to the very tip of his thumb. And then he made it, each one of these little parts on the ruler is about that big. Does anybody remember what this little part of a ruler is called? Has anybody ever heard of the little parts of a ruler? Isaiah?
The inches.
So each one of these little parts is called an inch. We're going to be doing something very similar to what we did yesterday, which was making estimates and then testing our estimates with making actual measurements. Who can remind me, what is an estimate? Why do I make an estimate when I'm doing math? Christina? An estimate sort of gives us an
idea.
And then, after I make my estimate, I do a real measurement. And why do I make a real measurement? Luce?
To make sure the answer's right.
To make sure my answer's right, so I get a good fit, right? Okay. So let's think about times when we make estimates and times when we make real accurate measurements. Who can think of a time when they would make an estimate? Anybody can think of a time when they would make an estimate?
To see if the number's close to the other number.
I think that, like we were talking about estimates at the store with our money, sometimes you go to the store and you want to see about how many things you can buy if you have $10 in your pocket. Did you ever go shopping for somebody to buy them a present and they weren't with you and you had to sort of guess what their size was going to be? You were estimating what size they would be. So those are times when we use estimates. And then other times, we need accurate measurements. We need to know exactly what size something is so that it fits perfect. Would you buy a shoe that sort of fits your foot? Or do you want a shoe that fits your foot perfect? Perfect, right? So that's the time when we use accurate measurements. So then I have another book today, and it's called Inch by Inch, and it's written by Leo Liam. Don't eat me. I'm an inchworm. I am useful. I measure things. Is that so? Said the robin. Then measure my tail. That's easy, said the inchworm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inches. Just think, said the robin. My tail is 5 inches long. And with the inchworm, he flew to where other birds needed to be measured. And I want you to turn to the person next to you and talk about a time that you needed to measure something.
Somebody that was pregnant and they weighed 13 inches. Well, I wanted to measure my dog's tail, yeah.
The ball can't be the wrong Okay, beautiful. Everybody's facing forward again. Good job. I heard some really good conversations about some different kinds of measurements that we do. And I was talking to Ativa and Kazim, and they told me one person that they think knows how to use measurements. Can you guys share with the rest of the class? And everybody else needs to think about, is this something like the answer that you were talking about with your partner?
A man who builds a building.
A man who builds a building. Beautiful. And we are going to think about measuring in these little parts that were called what again? Ricardo? Inches. Beautiful. So let's look up front here. Miss Rios drew a red line on the board. Does everybody see it? Okay. So if Miss Rios wanted to measure this line in inches, she would take her ruler and she would put it up to the red line. Would she put it up like this?
No.
Can somebody tell me, what is Miss Rios doing wrong? What is Miss Rios doing wrong? Cousin?
You put in a 12 at the end.
I started at the wrong end, that's right. Because we don't count from 12 backwards, we count from 1 and we count up, right? If we put that right at the end and we look to see how long the line is, who can tell me? Can you see? Where does that line stop? How many inches is my line? Who's got it? Tamaya?
8 inches.
8 inches. Beautiful. Do we agree or disagree? Great. Okay, so to help us practice making our measurements and making estimates, I have a bag like this for every single person in the room. And inside this bag, I have lots of different things. I've got a big twisty tie. I've got a feather. Everybody's feather's a different color, but everybody's got one. I've got a piece of string. It's kind of long, huh? And then I also have a wooden stick. Remember, Isaiah, we hold our ideas until the end and then we ask questions, okay? Everybody's going to get one of these bags. And they're also going to get a sheet like this. And this sheet looks a lot like the sheet that we used yesterday. So it has all of the things that we're going to measure, and then it has a place for us to put our estimates, and it has a place for us to put our actual measurement. What part of my body could I use to estimate how big an inch is? Cynthia, your thumb. About how many inches or about how many parts of our thumb do we think are inside a pencil? Joanna?
5.
5? Joanna thinks about 5. Well, let's get some other ideas. Who thinks about how many? What do you think you know? About how many? Jalen?
6.
About 6? About 5 or 6? So where would I write that answer? In what part of the chart? Christina?
Middle.
In the middle, where it says estimate, right? So I'm going to write 6. And I'm measuring in what? What am I counting? 6 what? 6, Ricardo? Inches. So I'm going to write inches next to that so I remember. And then, if I really wanted to measure it, I would put my ruler right next to my pencil, and I would start it right at the end. How many inches is it?
7.
7 inches? Okay. So now what part of the chart am I going to put my actual measurement in? Loose? The last one that says actual measurement. So I would write, what was it again? Jalen? 7. So I would write 7, and then I would write what next to my 7? Ricardo?
Inches.
Inches, because I'm measuring in inches. So who thinks that they're going to be able to go back to their seat and make some good estimates and accurate measurements? Everybody, beautiful. Okay, so I think we're ready to go practice. I would like table monitors to please stand up and take one bin. This has all of the bags. Take the whole thing. Take that whole thing to your table. Raven, back to table 2. Erica, table 3. Jalen, you're out. Joanna. Tamaya, waiting nicely, thank you. Luz.
Okay, so slightly different thing going on there in that classroom. So let's talk a little bit about, or let's give you a few minutes to work with those. So what were some of the takeaways from this classroom? And let's focus our comments on delivery of instruction this time. So from that perspective. What did you see in that circle time?
Pacing was like incredibly slow.
Yeah.
Like painfully slow. And I think it led to some disengagement of kids.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm just like, from an order perspective, so like, I would like delivers accurate information to be at the top. Because I feel like if you're not doing that, then like,
The
I
rest of it,
don't
the rest
really
of
care.
it falls apart.
Yeah.
The rest of it falls apart, right?
That's interesting. And did you say that because you were afraid she was not delivering some accurate information?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
The reason she gave for estimation were different from the examples she gave for estimation. There was not a clear purpose for it. And if I'm a child, like, I like that book and I think it's probably useful, but I think that's like actually how inches and feet are made now. And that's not accurate. Like, just all of it
Got
was
it.
all
Yep.
over the place for me. So I can't really get past that if I'm
Sure.
thinking about delivery of instruction.
Okay. Good. Good one.
So then in the tool, where would you rate her down? If you were to go in?
Excellent question.
So I guess I'd probably start with the objectives are unclear and lack rigor or alignment to learning standards.
And I didn't see any objectives written on the board either.
No.
Either it
Yeah.
didn't get recorded or,
Yeah.
Right.
so I think
Yeah.
that's like rule number 1, you need to write the
Yeah.
objectives.
Yeah.
Right there. How about definitions? I know the kids are small, but how about starting the class with what do you think estimation is? How would you define it? Because there you're also talking about vocabulary, you're also doing some interdisciplinary literacy. When we saw it the first time,
Yeah.
I thought about it.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And there were not. That's a good point. Like I didn't see a word wall or
Right.
something, right? That would have.
It's like a new word.
Yeah. Those were
Well,
new
talked
words.
about it yesterday. It's like they talked about it yesterday, but
Okay.
she didn't really, but she never defined
Right.
it.
She doesn't do a recall.
Right.
If I were class, I would be like, okay, what did we learn, what did we learn yesterday? Come on, 10 minutes. And then today, it's like
Yeah.
a recall.
Yeah.
I was very excited that she said, why do I make an estimate?
She gave an example of a shoe for sure.
But then like the student said an idea.
Yeah.
So like just from, I mean, there's a lot going on, but like
Yeah.
verbal articulation on the part of children was so stilted. And she just totally rounded up like everything they said. You know, kids had an idea and then she went into this like whole other reason about why that didn't really define it or give a clear purpose. Yeah.
One thing I observed was that she had the observer right in front. I would, kind of make myself a little invisible and not right in front of my face.
Yeah, because you did see the kids sort of on the edge, craning
Yes.
their neck, and
Yes.
some of that's to be expected with a second grade class. But at the same point,
And also for the teacher, I'm sitting here and my observer is right here. I'm like, okay, are you watching me? Am I doing it right? It's those body language.
So are we thinking a 2 for this teacher in delivery of instruction? She's minimally effective. Would you rate her ineffective because you can't get past that wrong information piece?
I would put her higher than 2.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 seems too low.
Okay. Alright.
2.5.
See, even
not
Kevin
quite,
has to do
not
that.
quite.
But I mean, I think that brings back our conversation that we were talking about before this exercise, which is rating and recording the specific domain items and not just trying to sort of round up to the big number for the category. That it would be helpful here to be able to rate different things, the different items within that category differently. Because she was really enthusiastic. You gotta give her that. I mean, that enthusiasm was a 3 or 4. It's a different kind of enthusiasm than the teacher we saw before. But there was definite, enthusiasm. Certainly, and she activated students' prior knowledge. There were some things that she did do, but you're right. Some of the bigger pieces were not attended to. If we were looking at further iterations of this particular tool, would it be? So I totally hear your point about delivering accurate information. Wow, that better be up there. That should maybe be up first. It should also perhaps be important to roll up the objective-driven lessons and clear outcomes in a different order. And those might be things you'd want to see in a tool revision.
You can't do it, because it's not a linear thing, but I think there is I think you're right that it's first leads objective-driven lessons, then it delivers accurate information. Then from there, you're using teaching strategies, you're incorporating questions. There is a little bit of a scaffolded approach that helps from an observer lens.
Exactly.
Where is the foundation there, and then we're working on the engagement,
right, sort of that logical order and a logical flow. That would be a key that would help. Would there ever be an instance in which you would want to wait, maybe in you would want to weight the accurate information item more heavily than some of those other pieces, or do you feel like having just kind of pulling them all together is okay for you? It's probably not the most cogent way to ask that question.
No, I think it's a good question, right? Because there's 9 things, and so I could be really enthusiastic and have a lot of strategies and be effective even if my information isn't accurate. That's not cool. But it's also, I think one way to address it is by naming top priority and then moving down. I think another way would be, and I know this has been through many stages.
But it's,
I think if I look at these 9 things and I think what is really going to have an impact on student learning, I think you could pare it down further so that you have 5 to 6 things of more equal substance.
Yeah. I mean, so it was interesting because last year, during the pilot year, it seemed like last year was the year of questioning. Everybody, it seemed, was really working on that higher order questioning and drilling down on that. And we kept hearing that as we would have discussions with with the COP. But I do think there's sort of, right, I mean, you want, I love your tool alignment thought as a leader in a school, but I think the other piece is the ability of a tool to sort of flex up and flex down as particular issues arise, are important, are trendy, right? So I think those are also pieces for us to take away and frankly continue to iterate on this, and could possibly lead to a design feature as well, right? I mean, if this is an online tool, you know, maybe there's an administrative back end where you sort of make those adjustments and reorder things so it makes sense for your instruction and focus for your school. Cool. We'll do one shorter session before we break for lunch here, and that is on giving feedback, planning and conducting a post-evaluation conference. This is pulled from a variety of sources. Would absolutely in this section invite you all to reflect, interject, add to, because you all are the experts in this. The way this process is interpreted and supported by the model teacher evaluation system is really a cyclical piece, right? Plan your evaluation as a leader, be ready to do your evaluation, go in and conduct it, plan your feedback session, go into your feedback session having materials prepared, knowing what you're going to talk about, and setting it up in such a way that it is truly a feedback session and not sort of, here's what I saw. When you're in that feedback session, you're discussing and debriefing. Giving an opportunity, asking open-ended questions, having it be a give and take, checking your assumptions as an observer, creating the action plan and timeline, and then repeating this so that action plan and timeline kind of becomes the accountability loop. You know, certainly bringing the action plan into the planning process for the next evaluation is the goal that you'd want to be shooting for. Does that look pretty close to what you all are currently doing? How many of you do, so Brooklyn does the self-assessment at the beginning of the year. Is that something that Mary Kate and you all have worked in as well?
We don't, I mean, we have baseline cost and quality, but we don't have like a self-evaluation.
We kind of just, we're in a different time, because you're only evaluated once. Most of our teachers are getting observed once a week or once every other week.
Oh, great.
So it's like way more frequent, but those are what we call evaluations.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we do our evaluation at the mid-year.
Okay.
So that it's more of an opportunity to say, like, here's where you are,
Okay.
here's where we would like you to be in order to return, like, just more proactive
Sure.
as opposed to like.
So what does the debrief from those frequent weekly or every other week sessions look like? That aren't really evaluations, but I guess they're observations, right?
They are, yeah. So I'm just looking at the information. So it's much faster. It's like we're working on questioning, say, on checks for understanding, and here's like, let's talk about how that went. Here was what it was effective. Look, here's the next thing to try. Here's when I'll be back to see it. That kind of just more focused. Yeah.
Great. Always good to kind of keep in mind, you know, when I taught writing in middle school, we used to use BATP. Does anybody still use BATP? Yeah. So sort of those like little things that you put up at the top of your at the top of a session always or the top of a paper to keep in mind. With your feedback statements, to keep them very specific, that they're evidence-based, and that you're talking about observed behavior. If you want to get into the motives or kind of what resulted in the observed behavior, get to that by the conversation that you have around it, certainly. And the continuous improvement frame is really that, what can we do? How can we plan this? What is going to work for you? Are you a person that wants to go to other classrooms and see questioning modeled? Are you the type of person that wants me to send you a bunch of articles so you can read about it? Do you want me to drop by more often? Are there certain lessons you want me to come to see? So offering sort of that whole suite of opportunities for improvement. I did teach middle school and I did do student council, so mnemonics are one of my favorite things. So a good mnemonic for action planning with the teachers is the GROW mnemonic. The G in GROW is goal. So 2 to 3 specific goals that you want to propose based on the results of your observation. Reality, so that's where you're trying to get a sense of the teacher's perspectives. What's happening? Is it the class? Is it the topic? Is it, what are your challenges here? So then start moving into some problem solving. And one of the things I love about this one is the co-creation, that this is a collaborative effort that you should be encouraging when you're setting up these feedback sessions, that it's not going to be all about the teacher coming in and being a sponge and hearing from you, but they should be coming in with their point of view and ready to engage in a conversation. And you should be leading that conversation with these open-ended questions and trying to elicit some information from them instead of wanting to go immediately to that solutions and here's what I've seen work really well other places. And then the will. So what's the loop going to look like? What are you going to do next? When are you going to start this? And really putting, and what you notice in this will piece is that you're putting the onus on the teacher, the educator, to kind of commit to his or her action steps right there in that space. Reflections on that mnemonic, does it ring true to what you all are actually doing already? Anything that you do that you would want to share as a good structure or something that's been useful in your schools?
I think it's all really next sounds like our coaching cycle. Teachers, I think the piece that continues to refine is that accountability piece of like, so this is what has to change, and then how am I as a leader holding you accountable for doing that, and where are we tracking that? So.
Yeah. And is it the just making sure you have, because time is limited and such a precious commodity, is it making the time for the accountability, or is it more getting the educator to take ownership for their part of the accountability loop?
I think it's a little bit of both, plus like one of the things that we struggle with is we have all these different pieces of observations and coaching done by principals and coaches and external observers, and sort of like how is that all mapped on into one place so the teacher has all the inputs and knows what he or she's supposed to be working on. So, yeah, a little bit of all that.
Is that something you think you would want an online tool to help with, like that ability to kind of like create a portfolio of sorts?
We kind of have that. We have like a dashboard for each classroom, which
Okay.
is pretty comprehensive.
Okay.
It's a matter of, actually it's really comprehensive, it's a matter of making sure the teachers repeat all parts of it.
Yeah. Okay. Good thoughts. Other reflections on this, or things that you found as, even from a time management perspective as a leader, that just kind of helps you keep all of this moving and going from a systems point of view at your schools?
Yeah, I mean, we have a similar, like, this is what this person is working on right now, so that in addition to like classroom data, it's like current goal of the CAP. Because at any given moment, you can go in and see a whole variety of things that you might want to prioritize or coach on or give feedback on. But that, like, if we can stay focused on that teacher's role and supporting them, they're more likely to achieve it and then move on to the next one instead of just like, kind of like what you were saying, just a million inputs all the time.
Yes.
Right.
How do I
Yeah.
prioritize?
Yeah.
Yeah, what does the teacher really feel like he or she can grasp and connect to, and with the balance of the year?
Right.
It's giving a teacher 25 goals that you think, we are in March or January for your media evaluation, they're going to look at you like, you're crazy. I can't do that by May.
Yeah.
What I can do is, under real, take a look at the opportunities for growth and take these three things and see if I can sort of practice that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a constant, like, it's challenging on both sides, right? I mean, just to schedule all of this, keep all of it straight, and if you've got sort of this comprehensive or distributed coaching model, then to have everybody saying the same thing to each educator, so it doesn't become this, well, last week, so-and-so told me that, I was supposed to work on this, now you're telling me this, how am I, yeah, definitely. Yes. One of the other things I did did here in DC a few years ago was worked with the team who did the education funding adequacy study. And that was at the beginning of the rollout of Impact. So even from one of the exercises that we did was professional judgment panels, where we brought educators, elementary, middle, and high school together to talk about, okay, you've got to run a school. What kind of staffing do you need to run this school and meet all of the requirements of the district? And when it came to high schools, it was a real challenge for them to think about, like, let's really think about the staff that we have to have. And I would imagine in pre-K programs, it would be the same challenge that the high schools had was, if we've got to do all of these observations, have all of these feedback sessions, do this coaching, that requires a very different model of administrative time and flexibility, and that certainly came out and was accounted for when recommendations are made. So it's very interesting to kind of look at all of the systems implications of something like a teacher evaluation system. Well, actually, let me start with this question. How many of you know about Learn DC? Just a little. Yay! Oh, there we go. Jill is being our overachiever in the back, like, I do. So, Learn DC is your one-stop source for information in DC. We at Collaborative actually helped to build and develop Learn DC, and there are really three major parts and components to Learn DC. I'll come to this side so Stephanie can actually see what she's doing.
Thanks.
So one of the big pieces are the school profiles. That's really a tool that is geared mostly towards parents, but useful for a lot of other folks. So it's actually lists all DC schools and LEAs. You're able to view and compare schools, get DC report card information about those schools, and also the equity reports are posted online there. So it's a terrific tool when parents are trying to make some decisions about where they want to send their kids, when educators are trying to make decisions about where they want to look at teaching, and also to share all of the federally required information. So that is one of the big resources. The other big resource, we'll do early childhood next, is the early childhood page on LearnDC, and this was actually where we started because this website started in support of the Sing, Play, Learn. Was it Sing, Play, Read? Sing, Play,
Read.
What?
Sing, Play, Read.
Thank you. Sing, Play, Read. And we created a set of resources to help parents understand developmental touch points within certain age ranges, books that they might seek, how they might use those books with their children, and then just some developmental steps on how they can ensure that their little ones are going to be prepared for kindergarten and progressing on pace. And then where all of our great model teacher evaluation systems tools are in LearnDC classrooms. And I'll have Stephanie take it from there. We've got a growing resource library. So Common Core resources, it's a really great place to send parents if they have questions about Common Core. Assessment resources, and then MTES. Oh, I'm sorry, and Next Gen Science Standards are here too.
Yes, I definitely encourage you guys to take a look at this even beyond what you're looking for MTES. There's a really robust research and different tool resource library for things that are at your disposal. So I'm going to be showing you guys the content and the instruction section of this because that's where the MTES resources are. But like I said, please feel free to play around with it and look at all the different things that are available. So if you go to the instruction section of LearnDC, there's a page for DC Model Teacher Evaluation System. Has a little bit of background about how this was created. There is a page as part of this that unpacks the evaluation rubric, and it has for each section of the rubric description of effectiveness and some kind of information about each of the components. And then you can actually download each individual section of rubric if you just wanted to focus on learning environment. For example, when you are doing an observation, you could just download those 3 pages versus needing the multi-page document to carry on with you.
Oh, you want to point out the resources too there?
Yes. And there are also resources that go with each section of the rubric if you're looking to learn more about particular areas or to point your teachers towards specific areas to improve. This is definitely worth exploring. Sorry, it's kind of hard to steer on this. There's also a general resource library for different tools that you'll want as part of your work with MTES. And this is in the process of getting linked to on the main front of the MTES page, but it's taking a little bit of time for the updates process, so it should be up in the next hour or so. But if you link directly to this resource library, it has links to all the different things that you I want to use. Okay, so there's some new resources in here that are particularly of note. Starting, if you start in the D's, they all have DC model teacher evaluation tags at the beginning. There's a new quick guidebook publication that unpacks student learning objectives that is new as of this month. You can directly download the classroom observation tool in here if you're interested in having additional copies beyond what are in your packets. There's a communications toolkit that gives you
Which actually they have in their folders,
oh,
and I'll
right.
talk about that. Yeah.
Perfect. So we'll go through that in a little bit, but it has some information about best practices. There's a research report in here that we can talk a little bit about.
I can see it on my page though.
Really?
Yeah.
It's in there. It should be part of the update that's coming through. Okay. But you can download the full research report in here. And this is also brand new, and we're really excited about this. We created a webinar series as part of our work on this project that has some intro webinars kind of explaining the tenets of the evaluation system, kind of like things we talked about today. Kamita and Nina spoke on a webinar about the results from their evaluation, and then there's also some deep dives on student learning objectives, and we had Hilda Williams from Washington U Ying, who was part of our pilot, also come on to talk about her experience with implementation. So these are some great short videos that might be of interest.
Yep, they're 15 to 30 minutes in length and give you sort of some nice overviews and additional information. So let's talk about a couple of these resources that we can thank Brocklin for, all of them. It's all his fault. On the left side of your folder, there are two resources. Two things were brought forward in some of our closing conversations about the pilot year last year. And the one really sticky point for folks was student learning objectives, particularly for subjects and teachers who don't teach in an area that's assessed. People just weren't, they were setting student learning objectives at the beginning of the year. They found that people had kind of just forget about them over the course of the year and then go to revisit them at the end of the year. And it just wasn't, for most people, it just wasn't really integrating into their observation and evaluation system, really in the way that the big framework envisioned them to. So there's two resources specific to that point, and then some slides I'll share in a little bit that you actually have with you today. The SLO Quick Guidebook, which is a really super resource, would be great to share and download, particularly for new teachers. That really walks them through the steps of creating, or the steps of the student learning objective process, and unpacks it in a nice way. So that's one of the resources, and we'll share some of the high-level introductory materials from that in just a minute in the slides. The other piece was thinking about how you might use the MTES in some other subject areas. We know that it got used and was pretty easily adapted to early learning classrooms, early childhood classrooms. But there's still, because we had Yu Ying participating, because of course making modifications for second language, English language learning classrooms and special education classrooms. We wanted to pull something together to that school leaders would be able to give to teachers and be able to look at, to think about, okay, well, yeah, I can use this. I just need to think about it in some different ways. And this is really grounded in the idea that good instruction is good instruction no matter where you are. However, certainly in when you look at the rubric and you think about learning environment, delivery of instruction, some of the professional foundations, there are some additional things you should be looking at. And certainly if you're looking at lesson plans for special education classrooms or English learning classrooms, there should be some additional pieces there, right, that show that they are being carefully, that the different students' IEPs and individual levels, their proficiency levels, if it's an English language learning classroom, that all of those considerations should be in there. So we created kind of a one-pager that helps people think about what those other, what that might look like. One of the first ones, and this was really born out of the experience of the community of practice, because there we all were trying to observe Chinese immersion instruction in first grade, which, for learning environment, the positive relationships and respect, okay, you may not know a thing that they're saying, but you can tell by the way the teacher and students are interacting, the body language, the reactions of the students. You can still, you can still observe those, and you can still comment on those. So, where in a special education classroom, there may very well be some specific protocols that are in place for interaction between particular students, between teachers and particular students, because of IEP or 504 plan that they have in place. So those are two of the tools that we created based on feedback that we think will be really helpful as people work on implementing the model teacher evaluation system. One of the other tools is on the right-hand side. And because we're a communications firm, and sometimes what we do is marketing and helping people speak clearly about what it is that they're hoping to do or trying to do. And that's what is in this implementation toolkit. If you decide that you're going to implement MTES, we have given you a whole bunch of tools to help to make that go smoothly. So the first page is a newsletter blurb that you might put in your school newsletter, your teacher newsletter. There are 2 pages of frequently asked questions that you could distribute. All of you here are in, are in individual LEAs, so you might need to communicate with board members in addition to parents if you're looking to implement something new. We've got resources and tools that are hot linked that you could email out to teachers as you go to implement. And then also 2 pages, actually 3 pages of implementation best practices that you could, you could roll those out in interesting ways if you do a weekly or a monthly sort of push out of information to teachers. You could pop one of these best practice ideas into those regular communications with teachers. So we really wanted, we really thought and heard from folks in the pilot year that having resources that help you actually introduce these ideas and these materials are super helpful. There's also So the introductory webinar that is now posted on LearnDC uses a set of PowerPoint slides that are actually designed to be sort of a standard slide deck that you could share at a faculty meeting, or you could actually share the video of the webinar at a faculty meeting to introduce things to folks. So we wanted to make it as turnkey as possible, to borrow a phrase. Brooklyn, of these sort of implementation tools and things, I don't know, if you were just conducting this 15-minute conversation, what would be some of the things that you would mention, or things that, questions that teachers had that you had to attend to and respond to?
Well, first I think you have to be real reflective about where you are, and what you're planning on rolling out, and what your end goal, and then I think that's a great starting point for you. If this is something that you want to roll out in its entirety, I say all of these tools will be great, but if it's something that you're going to integrate into your existing system, I think you have to have that conversation with your teachers about how this particular tool would help them strengthen their practice, and which portions of it. I don't know, that's just based on my experience of working with a lot of teachers. They really struggle with administrators who want to do many things in a very short period of time. Limiting opportunities for them to work closely with their colleagues in a team setting, doing assessments for children, and teaching, just overall teaching. So I think wherever you decide to pick from this, you just have to really have an honest conversation with yourself and say, all of these are wonderful, but what can I start with today? And what would make the most sense for our teachers?
And have a strategy, have a roadmap for how you might roll this out.
Yeah.
Whether it's, whether your school is a model where there's real collective decision making and teachers really engaged in making decisions around the how you're going to progress over the course of a year in school, or if there's sort of a group or a set of the leadership team that makes some of these decisions. Making the decision is part, but then having the strategy and thinking about, okay, over the course of a year, let's map this out. Let's think about what this will look like. Let's build into the rollout some checkpoints where we can make mid-course corrections, because we all know that plan that you set in September typically gets, you run into some barriers over the way, and if you kind of schedule those midpoint check-ins as you're planning, then that gives you an opportunity to seek some of the feedback from the educators in your building, to be able to have some of those hard conversations about whether or not this is working. Kavita, anything salient from the evaluation that you want to bring up in
terms of
in terms of implementation in general? So how folks implemented, perceived.
In terms of the survey responses from the 7 ADAs who actively participated, I think they wanted to send out a message of implementing it early and often, and then having check marks in terms of how did the feedback go, and also include any credit to the teachers. It shouldn't be just we were given 2.5, we were given 2.75 because of this, but also trying to interest the teachers to understand why they were given that kind of a rating, high rating, or late rating, or low rating. And also, I think there was one school that said that they would want the teachers also to do some kind of a PLCs and have a reflection sessions where they can sit and talk about their evaluation process, not kind of revealing their own numbers, but hey, so this is what I received. What do you think your experience has been with the overall evaluation process? I think that was also critical. But again, the sample size was small. But we learn some really good lessons out of that.
But I think that PLC idea is an interesting one, particularly when you're implementing something new, because that gives, that helps to break down the barriers sometimes that you get from when you're asking for implementation feedback from individual teachers, because no longer is it just, oh, it's Ms. Rios's perceptions on how this is going, but feedback can be presented from a professional learning community to the administrative team, to the leadership team who's implementing this, and I think it helps to bring down the stress level and make people feel like they're, you know, it can't just be attributed to you or to somebody else, or, you know, oh, well, the principal doesn't like me anyway, so why am I going to tell them what I feel about this, right? It kind of creates a nice way to have those conversations and get some more unvarnished feedback.
Some of the work that we've done with PG County and also the Richmond Public Schools in Virginia, it actually, some of the common themes that emerged from the teacher evaluation system was that teachers, we tracked the teachers from year 1 to year 5 through the DIF grant, the Teacher Incentive Fund grant. And it's a process of reflection. It's a process of, again, growth mindset, not only for students, but also for the teachers. And not sure if you want me to talk about the SLOs as to what we found in
Yeah, we'll get into that, that in a minute. But I think those are some of the big takeaways that we heard from an implementation point of view, and how schools really thought about, well, okay, how would we do this? What did we find successful?
And consistency and objectivity. I
Yeah.
think that really kind of stood out for us. Is they want to be consistent in terms of when do they want to assess the teachers, how often, so that they know that, okay, this is the time period, this is when I am prepared to do it. And not just, oh, I have some 10 minutes time, let me just go and assess the teacher. It doesn't work that way. You need to have it in your timetable, you need to have a group. And there was also a suggestion that we want to implement in the school, but we want others also to be trained, because I don't want to be the bad cop. I want to be going into the classroom as a team. So there was a need that let's train a few other supervisors, administrators, instructional leadership level people, so that we all go in either as a group or we tag team or we do it collaboratively, so that teachers don't feel that we are evaluating the same person, the same ratings all the time. So those are some of the key points that came out across the LEAs that
And then, you know, something kind of unique to Appletree that you can think about, because you are a multi-site LEA. One of the really positive pieces of feedback that we got from last year's pilot group at the Community of Practice was how terrific it was as a leader to have a community of practice to be able to talk about your implementation successes and challenges, and also just to be able to talk about sort of broader issues related to observation and evaluation of teachers. That you know, we're setting up this really nice learning community and this growth mindset for teachers, and there's a bunch of them in a school who can actually get together and have these reflective conversations. But the administrative team often doesn't have that same opportunity, and we found that the participating LEAs who were with us last year got so much out of just, you know, being able to come together once a month for 2 or 3 hours to just be able to talk about evaluation, to be able to talk about observation. That was great, and you know, you're in a nice setting to be able to do that, right? To find a way to bring multiple staff from multiple sites together to have some bigger conversations. But I think, you know, DC is compact enough and the schools are close enough that you could look to develop something with just some schools in the area, or you know, bring some of your friends together to do that. Have coffee chats. All things that we've suggested suggested to OSSE, by the way, of course, Annette's not in here now for me to remind her that we've suggested those to OSSE, but no, it was really nice to be able to show OSSE too, right, the value of their investment and having a strategic investment in that way. So let's switch to SLOs, which I always get confused. I don't know how you do it, Kavita, but I get confused because I live in Virginia, and of course, as we all know, Virginia has SOLs. So if I skip and accidentally say SOL instead of SLO, I am thinking of the Virginia Standards of Learning and not something else. What an unfortunate acronym they picked. So student learning objectives. It's really all about, if we've got a growth mindset for our teachers, we also need to have that growth mindset for our students. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is take a bunch of students who come to us in the beginning of the year, all at different places, and make sure that we design instruction all over the year to get them to a single point at the end of the year. So SLOs, it's a measurable long-term academic goal that teachers set for students. Okay. So what are some of the key pieces? Starting down the bottom right, it's the most important learning for the year or the semester. If you think about going back a couple of years, there was the popular big hairy goal term, if any of you remember that. And SLO is like the big hairy goal. If you are teaching 9th grade algebra, one of your SLOs would probably be students learning how to graph and solve equations, right? So, but your SLOs, while they're tied to Common Core, they're tied to curricular standards, they also need to be tuned to where your students are. Where are the students at when they come to you? You'll look back at their previous assessment scores. You might give a diagnostic test at the beginning of the year if you're working with pre-K3 and pre-K4 and not have a history of assessments or scores to go back on. But you want to make sure that when you are sitting down to craft your SLO, that you're starting from data and building up from that data. They're specific and measurable. Remember the good old SMART goals that we learned about, right? So you want your SLO to be specific and you want to be able to measure it in some way over the course of the year. And of course, you want it to be aligned to the standards. In a lot of cases, the SLOs are predetermined for you in some ways, but for other grade levels, for other subject areas, you need to be looking at other benchmarking to come up with your SLOs. This is all, again, kind of a preview of what's in that quick start packet. So really, SLOs fit nicely into this whole idea of growth mindset, as I said earlier, and it's really a way to help guide teaching practice, to acknowledge that the most important thing that happens over a course of the year is that interaction that the teachers are having with those students. And the way that they are adjusting their plans and adjusting their instruction over the year to get the most out of the students. What often happens, and it's interesting, I mean, this is not uncommon. I'll give you a perfect analogy for SLOs that my team in the back is going to be like, oh, I cannot believe she is going there. So, collaborative, we're a business, we have metrics that we work from. When we design, when we bring in a new project, we look at our project budget and see how much we have to spend, and our expenses are really our time. So we kind of come up with some smart estimates about how many hours is going to take Stephanie to do something, and Erin and Jill and Pratibha, and we roll this all out into a framework that we have, and we track our time against projects. And because we put it into this document, it sometimes feels, and for some people it's like, I put it down on paper, it's there, it can't change, it's immutable, it's gotta stay that way until the end. And it's the same thing with SLOs, right? There are a lot of teachers who, will have their SLOs created at the beginning of the year and think about them as this immutable thing that they have to figure out, that they have to have in mind. But no, they're adaptable. It's a collaborative process. It's something like your implementation plan for MTES, that there are certainly points that you build in over the course of the year as checkpoints to check your progress, and then you make adjustments and you make changes as you need to make them. And I think that, we heard a lot from our pilot group that, this SLO thing is just not working for us. And as we started to unpack it and think about it, it's these last two things, I think, that really cause the challenges for people, that, your teachers are seeing SLOs as these immutable things. I write them down once, they're in ink, they can't change. And I've got to, I can't talk to anybody else about them.
And also, I think from the surveys, it was also lack of understanding. One, obviously, it was lack of understanding of what SLOs really are, what are they meant to be as a group model, and also the lack of support from the administrator. So they get these directives, and they think they're supposed to work from them, and if they don't meet them, there goes their SLOs. I'm not supposed to treat them, I'm not supposed to understand how it works for my students.
Yeah.
Especially SLOs would be very different from a classroom with special education kids as compared to some others who might be performing at the mid or the higher level. You cannot have the same SLOs. There was a misunderstanding that, oh, am I supposed to have SLOs similar to the teacher who does arts or drama or something else? The answer is no. So I think from the surveys what we learned was that there is this fear factor around SLOs because they don't understand. And that's why they're afraid. So all the questions that were related to SLOs, they were like, we don't understand, we're not clear, we need help. So I think that's the potential for some training and some more feedback as to what do you think SLOs are.
I'm trying to understand how they're different from standards.
Standards are something, at least from schools that I've worked at, the standards are something that are mandated by the district. SLOs are more contained within the classroom or within the school. So the schools I work with in Richmond Public Schools, they have two SLOs, student learning objectives, a school-wide goal and a classroom-wide goal. And then they have the state standards. They were like, we are supposed to have these big goals and objectives that you're supposed to meet, but then you have your own individual goals as well. The teachers were assessed, however, on the SLOs, the student learning objectives, because they knew that the school was really low performing. It was a Title I school, they were struggling, they knew they could not meet the state mandated standards. So they went down and they said, this is something that is doable for us. This is doable for our teachers, and it doesn't affect their morale, so they work with the SLOs.
But were they generally aligned to the standards?
They were aligned, they are supposed to be, they have to be aligned to that. And they hired a consultant who was specialized in SLOs and working with each teacher to set goals for her and his classroom.
You know, so if you look at this middle school example here, in a way, I think this kind of gets to what you were just sharing, Kavita. Students will demonstrate mastery of proportional relationships and operations with rational numbers, two critical elements of the revised 7th grade district curriculum aligned to the Common Core state standards, right? So, you know, so the district follows and aligns their work to the state standards, but the SLO was dialed back a little bit to, to be more reflective of specific work and priorities that were happening in the district, as opposed to, you know, the Common Core.
So you could have several layers of SLOs. It could be a school-wide, it could be a vertical planning, it could be several grades together. We've seen all kinds of variations depending on where the schools are. A couple of grades came together and they said, this SLO works for our common grade because there are several sections within the same grade. And then they said, okay, let's set up a SLO, a couple of SLOs for math, a couple of SLOs for English. And then the special education teachers, they came together and they worked with the English language and mathematics teachers said that we want to work with you and integrate our SLOs because your SLOs will not work for our kids.
So again,
And
really.
then revisiting them, I think, is really critical. It's like benchmark testing. You do it before the beginning of the year, then middle, and then at the end, and then kind of revisiting where are they? Where are students? Are my goals really realistic for the kids the way they are, the way they are learning? Or do I have to treat them? Do I have to up them, down them? What should I do? So it's a very collaborative process. The teachers constantly came together during their planning time, during their PLCs within the classroom to revisit the SLOs.
And I think this process overview can be a nice, again, remembering the like mnemonics. Not surprisingly, I would like this as well. You know, you could print this out and put it on a card and have each, you know, each educator actually, well, they don't carry around grade books anymore, but I'm sure they carry around something that they've got that right there in front of them or on their desk as they're planning. Reviewing course objectives and standards and collecting and reviewing baseline data. Again, you know, if you've got older, you're teaching in an upper grade, you know, 3rd grade beyond, you would be able to look back at historical scores and more anecdotal data in student files to get some of that data. If it is appropriate, you might actually do a diagnostic test at the beginning of a semester or beginning of a year. So you've got all that data, you're going to lay that out, and based on that data, then think about, okay, so, you know, so what are my student learning objectives going to be? And then the important piece is, how can I measure it? And almost, you know, go back to, your old note-taking when you would, you know, take notes on one side and do analysis on the other. You know, set up a chart or a framework where you've got your learning objectives on one side and then, you know, the assessments, and start to name and identify right from the start how you would actually measure the student progress. Step 3 is where you start to get into that collaborative piece, and I think you can already start to see here how this part of the process would be really strong if you're working, much stronger for a teacher if instead of sitting at your desk alone to do that, you might be with a grade group or with a team or with another set of teachers. It could be really interesting instead of sort of articulating across to articulate up and down, right? So to maybe work with the grade before and the grade after to do an SLO setting together. That could be a really interesting approach in a school. But it's kind of, it's that reviewing, it's that gut check, right? Having somebody else look at what you've crafted and give you feedback and say, am I on the right track? Does this seem right to you? Then you start, these are sort of your preparatory steps. Now you're actually into the year, you're teaching, you're giving lessons, you're checking your progress on a regular basis. And then towards the end of the time period, you're going to do some review of your student performance data that you've collected and decide if you're meeting your objectives along the way. So, you can see, because we're talking about things at a semester or a year-long basis, how it can be super easy to lose attention to this over the course of the year, unless you're being very deliberate about setting up times and opportunities to work on your student learning objectives. Anything you would add to that, Kavita?
Just a question to all of you. Do you have, what are you doing in terms of SLOs? Do you have that process already going on in your schools, or are you thinking about it?
We don't call them SLOs, but we have, this is all aligned to goal setting, which is linked to standards, which is linked to student performance. We differentiate by student data, the bottom 25th percentile students, how much we expect them to grow. So I think it's all wrapped in. It's just just calls it for something different.
Yeah. So then, how is it arranged in terms of grade wise, or how is it done? The whole school has just one SLO, one objective that they're working towards, or is it different?
No, so we just do preschool, pre-K, and so we have standard assessments that we use 5 times per year, and most of our learning objectives or goals are built around those assessments and the gains that students make between each assessment period.
Okay.
And is that geared towards like kindergarten preparation?
Readiness,
Yeah. So
do
the
you
readiness.
use KRA? Do you use KRA, DIBELS? What do you use?
We use Every Child Ready.
Every Child.
Right, we don't have a standard levels.
DIBELS, right? DIBELS, I thought it was either KRA and Maryland, right? Kindergarten ready, and DIBELS.
Yeah. Not every state has a standard readiness assessment. Yeah. Mary Kate, how does this align to what you're doing with adult learners?
DC prep is preschool through 8th grade.
Oh, okay, so.
Just my role is to help
Got it, I'm sorry.
like our teachers and our leaders. I'm totally confused on this, but it's not worth clarifying, I don't think, at this point. We align our assessments to our standards and we progress monitor throughout the year for them to meet the standards.
So that's totally fine. It's understandable, because I think what you are talking about is the overall goal. These are the assessments and this is what we are trying to work towards. And if they are met or they're not met. They're not. Okay.
It's putting a different name and a slightly different process onto something that you're likely already doing. Which is, it sort of goes back, and let's see if I can find a slide. And the reason the SLO piece actually factors into this is, because of the overall evaluation, when we take all of these observations and we want to roll them up into an actual end of year evaluation, there's pretty significant agreement that just giving a teacher an evaluation only based on what you've observed and what you've rated all year long is not best practice. So that brings in the whole need to somehow connect the student growth factors in, and for a lot of schools, that's where the student learning objectives piece comes into play. Other schools, it's different. Any closing thoughts on the student learning objectives, the student growth pieces? Okay. So it's a good thing you have the SLO Quick Start Guide there, right, in your packets to take a look at, and it's really there provided as a resource. We heard loud and clear that over the course of the community of practice last year, this was an area that was just really difficult, really challenging for folks to work on. And as you can hear from Kavita reflecting and talking about some of her broader practices and experiences in other districts and other states, to do that piece well requires a significant commitment of time and
again,
also supports.
And it's an iterative process. It's the
Yep.
same thing as the coming up with the evaluation observation tool. There's no one perfect model that you're going to come up first to.
So that's that is the bulk of what the bulk of the new stuff we wanted to share with you. There are two other things we want to accomplish today, and that is to answer, now that we've kind of gone through all of this, is to answer remaining questions that you have, kind of keep track of and take down additional feedback that you have on the system. You had some great ideas today. I think every time we talk with new educators, we get more and more terrific and interesting advice. And then the really fun piece, which is okay, if we created an online tool for this, if we took it off paper and put it into an app, what would that app need to look like, and what would need to be there? So let's start by kind of overall questions and impressions, ideas for improvement or adjustment on the MTES and the resources here. I mean, I really liked what I heard earlier about the crosswalking, right? The ability to be able to crosswalk and have a look again at the connection between the rubric and the tool, and then also looking at the order of the items in that delivery of instruction piece. I think that's a really good point. And
it would be so helpful to me to know the research that went into this content, just what was accessed, and then this is so hard to do, but teaching is complex and nuanced, and it's helpful to have a tool that acknowledges that. And at the same time, as we were talking about before, some of these things are clearly less important, some are more and less important, and so I would just love to know, teachers who do these 10 things tend to get this kind of result, and teachers who only do 8, just
sure.
sort of, what's the biggest deal in here in terms of actionable feedback for a teacher?
Yeah, I think those are two really interesting and important pieces that we can approach in different ways, right? And your second comment, the first comment is there were a whole host of, or the answer to your first question, whole host of research-based tools that we looked at, Arizona and Danielson and this and that, and all the literature. We did do a session and a vetting of these materials, taking advantage of the great wealth of resources and people-wise and expertise that we have here in DC, and actually had a panel talk about a lot of the research and thinking behind MTES last year at one of the OSSE training days. But folks like tapping Keelan Connolly, who used to be in DCPS, who went to New America and is now going to CCSSO and is an expert in teacher evaluation practices across the country. So, tapped a whole bunch of folks along the way to weigh in, give us feedback. So very much based in the research that's out there that can get you, more details.
It's very evidently research-based. I'm just curious.
No, absolutely. It's helpful to know sort of where things come from, and sometimes when you know what some of the stronger influences are, it gives you some deeper understanding.
And I think it also just develops.
Yep.
Who can I learn from?
But I think your other piece is really interesting, and Annette, I think this could be an interesting next step for this tool, which relates to, maybe we've talked about having a COP part 2, so another community of practice that looks at some different pieces. I think it would be a really interesting opportunity to have the second community of practice start to agree to track their data and get to within these broad categories, within learning environment, what do we see bubbling up as the things that are really driving effective teaching, effective teachers do X in the learning environment space, based on what we see in a subset of DC schools. It would be a really interesting action research project, I think, and something that, I think school leaders from across the LEAs would want to participate in. I love that. Yeah.
You can answer that question.
I know, right? We'll be able to really take this on the road. What are some of
other things, just because if I'm using this rubric to talk to somebody, within positive relationships and respect, in each category, having a label for each line.
Sure.
Just as a reference point.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and that's kind of a good point, because when I was doing some backtracking to prepare some of the materials for that, I'm like, wait.
And then mapping it too.
Yeah, like the mapping. Other thoughts?
Plans to roll this out in an electronic version, not necessarily an app, but you log on and as a leadership user, you enter your name and password, and the system comes open and you can enter your teachers in there and start.
Yeah. So let's sort of have the bigger discussion about user requirements, and I partly say that out loud as my cue to everybody to start gathering and start asking those questions. So if you take it from the very beginning, I'm a teacher, I'm sitting down at my screen, I'm setting up for a new year, a new semester of teachers. You want to be able to go in, log in, type in the teachers you're going to be observing.
Yes.
So what fields do you need? You need the teacher name. What other fields, like if you're opening up, that first spreadsheet view, what do you want to see globally for the teachers that you're assigned to observe? Their names, what else? Grade level they're teaching. Subject, homeroom, if they have a homeroom, okay.
Or just what class they're teaching when you observe them.
Oh, okay.
So you can see when teachers teach this class, here's the impact on their score.
Right.
On their class. I think I would want to know, and this wouldn't have to be entered every time, but just years of teaching experience.
Okay.
So we like to look at it from that perspective.
Okay. So something to know whether they're a novice teacher, an experienced teacher, or something in their career.
Yeah.
Okay. What are some of the other?
Who the observer is.
Any other background information that you'd want to have popping up about your teacher on a main screen or home screen? Okay. So you've got sort of the background screen, and let's say you press your button to start your observation, and you're going into a classroom to do your observation. My first question is, what kind of device are you taking with you into the classroom to do this?
Classes, laptops.
Laptop? Laptop? Paper and pencil person? Nobody's using an iPad or a phone?
Definitely not phone.
Okay.
Maybe an iPad.
Okay. All right.
I would want to be able to just accommodate for different systems, right? So you could type directly in, but I could also upload notes and video.
Okay.
Video related
Yeah.
to a lesson.
Great. So uploading video, uploading maybe photos if you took some photos while you're in there. Either typing into a box or uploading notes.
I know Teach Boost lets you, it'll tag the times while you're in there. So you can just type and it tells you how far you are and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, whether or not it's an observation, maybe evaluation, or the final evaluation.
So I think you're actually, but you're talking about something else. So the Teach Boost, as you're typing your narrative notes, it'll say 10 minutes into the lesson, 20 minutes into the lesson, 30 minutes into the lesson.
That's awesome.
Yeah, okay. So you can kind of see at what point in the period. I guess you'd probably also want to, but yours is also important, like the date of the observation, the sort of class period or the time, begin and start and end time, I think would all be things you'd want to have.
Right.
As well in there. Okay. Is it important to be able to start and stop a single record? So let's say you're a middle school teacher or a middle school principal or the middle school leadership team, and you're scheduled to go in and do this observation. You get a ping and you gotta go take care of something. Would it be likely that you would have to step out of the observation for 5 or 10 minutes or even 2 minutes to attend to something, and then you'd want to be able to step back in and there would be like an auto save and you'd be able to pick right back up? Or okay, so that sounds like something you might want to do. Okay. Is it important for you to be able to click out of where you're observing and look at past observations while you're in the room? Is that a must-have or a nice-to-have?
Nice.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out, and that's one of those things I think of, from my experience, is that something I want to do in the moment, or is that something I might do as I'm preparing for the feedback? Yeah.
Section.
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel. What other things? I mean, are there people that you think would use a stylus to write? If it was like a writable program for an iPad, would there be people that would want to use a stylus to write, or do you think people are just all typers at this point? Be keyboarding.
Nobody at Apple would.
Yeah. No, I mean, you don't have to.
Same.
I'm just throwing out things that are in the realm of possibility. There's the realm of possibility, and then there's the realm of practicability. And we want to strike the right balance between the two. Anything else for the actual place where you would be taking narrative notes, recording pieces for the evaluation? It's the observation itself where you're in the room that you can think of. So let's turn to sort of the teacher reporting perspective and what you might give to teachers or share with teachers post-observation. what are some things that you want to be able to have there?
Is there a sample coaching form
Okay.
based on the observation?
Okay, so a coaching form or an action planning form that would go with it?
That can be viewed by the teacher, read by the teacher, and signed by the teacher electronically. And then you would get pinged and you would know that the person has completed it. So that it's for accountability purposes.
Yep.
Coaching.
Yep, yeah, we've definitely heard that before, so some kind of like electronic sign off and some ability to let you know when the report has been read, an ability for teachers to make comments, not line edits, but comments within the report, like you might, do a sticky on a PDF type of a thing. Possibly were other things that we have heard previously as far as that goes. Fatima, you can join in, but peer-to-peer sharing, is that something that you would want to have, or is this something that teachers would be like, I don't think I want to share this with my peers? So it's interesting. I asked we had a conversation about requirements gathering earlier at the end of August, and I thought, okay, would you want, there was a bunch of teachers. I'm like, you guys, as teachers, would you want to be able to take all this information and this record to your next school and share it with your new administrative team? They're all like, nope, don't want to do that. I'm no, not interested in that at all. Because they just kind of feel like the context is so different, the relationships are so different, that for them, they didn't really want that electronic portfolio, and I felt like that was kind of an interesting piece. So one thing we talked about, because we do have such an enormous amount of resources that we have gathered on Learn DC, would you want to be able, going along with your coaching piece, would you want to be able to tag resources and kind of roll them into the report back to teachers?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I think that was, we see a real power in that and a real interesting way to sort of set up a feedback loop and a learning loop.
Because this could become a learning community for the teacher.
Yeah.
Just another learning community among them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of, an interesting way to do that. And what if, now I'm going in the realm of possibility, I'm probably out of the realm of practicability, but it might be kind of interesting if, because some of the learning management systems do this, right? You've got like your dashboard and the things you want to learn and things you want to focus on. Would it be helpful if there were a way to push out the resources that you as an administrator share to any teacher? So let's say, Rocklyn, you've done an observation of Anne. You wanted to send her this resource on writing SLOs that you thought was really good, but you know that there are probably other people in the building who might see value in that same resource. Would it be of value if there was a way that, it would sort of pop up on everybody else's feed, like in your, like in your Facebook feed when you've got the trending section up top? Would it be helpful to kind of have trending resources for across the school to keep that community going? Or would that just become like?
I think speaking of person gravity, like one of the things I mentioned earlier is we juggle with getting everything in one system and in one piece, and I think like in my mind I'm having a hard time thinking about a whole other system in addition to what we already have.
Yeah. Fair enough.
I would say no on that, but
okay.
Just speaking for
okay. Yeah, no. Fair enough. And I think that's a big piece, right? Is like, you probably already have some front-facing systems for teachers where they're getting information and stuff is being fed to them. So thinking hard about, all right, how much of a teacher tool is this, and how much of an administrator tool is this, right? You know, so thinking about user stories and what makes sense for different people, I think is a really interesting and important thing to think about in this whole process. You know, if cost and talent were not at all barriers to what we would build here, what would be kind of that like moonshot thing that you would want as part of this? You know, what's that thing that you've been at your desk like, oh, if only somebody had an app for this, would you?
So here's what I would want.
All right.
I would want to say, I would want to know the like top 10. These are like the things that really matter for student learning. I'd want to be able to say like, okay, I'm really working on X. I can pull like 4 videos with strong practices in X. I can pull like, here's a sequence of action steps that a teacher used to improve in X. So basically like a model of what better looks like, a coaching plan to get there, and like then I would want to be able to share that with the teacher and like develop our own path, but just have like this is improvement to work.
Yeah.
I feel like often we're working on the same things. We're like replicating the same thinking, and if we could condense it and then match it to the teacher, but not always be thinking of like every instructional problem is a completely new instructional problem.
Sure, like sort of loading, kind of having, okay, here's instructional challenge X, and up pops at least the beginnings or the framework of some opportunities to coach and improve X.
Here's articles, here's videos, here are action steps.
Yeah. Maybe you could pull them from a tag list or something, right?
I think tags are a way to do it. I think there's different ways to organize it. But you were talking about questioning being the thing. Like, awesome, all these people are thinking about questioning.
Yep.
You should be able to like, what are the things that help teachers question better? Great, let's go.
Yeah. Maybe even crowdsourcing it and having ratings or whatever.
I think another way to do it is to like, when you were talking about, do you want to see like what's trending? I think, to me, the utility in that is like, we put all these things out to teachers, but I don't know which ones really like resonate with them.
Yeah.
In a systematic way. I know like in conversation or whatever.
Right.
I can see like, everybody's really looking at this and paying attention to it. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I know. And anything that would be on like your wish list or have to have list?
No, I mean, I agree with lots of the things that Mary Kay said. Yeah, having everything.
Okay. Rockland?
Yeah, all those things
Okay. And then one last question. I mean, we've talked about, certainly talked about security, right? And privacy and protecting people's information, because certainly these are this is information that needs to be protected, password protected beyond password. We have to be thoughtful about sort of where it gets cached and how it gets saved and where it all goes. I mean, are there things in your mind that have to be taken care of to ensure teacher or administrator buy-in? Like, what would be, like, if we didn't have a good answer for X, what would make teachers and or administrators just shut down and be like, nope, not using it?
low cost or no cost.
Okay, low cost or no cost?
Cloud-based.
Cloud-based?
I think teachers need to be able to see their own,
Okay.
not everybody else's.
Yep.
That transparent to them what's happening, evaluatively, but obviously that they can't see it.
I think that teachers can see and leaders can understand
this would align to other things that we're already doing.
Okay, all right. Timestamps, having that kind of stuff, so sort of the accountability tracking. Knowing when people have gone in and being able to track people's usage, not so much, or.
I think an investment in a rollout of this, if we're successful in getting off the ground, a major rollout of this, so that you can understand how to use it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there would have to be a whole thoughtful, right, socialization and getting used to it and kind of understanding, and probably a lot of peer-to-peer opportunities to get to know more about the system, how it works, what it's capable of, what can